Wow, this is a nice couch you picked out, sweetie. I really like it.
Great. I'm so glad you like it.
I feel like it's missing something, though.
Yeah, I know. We need an end table.
An end table.
Yeah, I like it.
Welcome to Cutting Out Back, Episode 1, the Spielberg End Table. This particular piece of wood was staring at me from the sale rack at Woodcraft, so I had to pick it up. It's Sapele, or Sapele, not really sure which one. I also thought it would be perfect for an end table I needed to create for my wife's new couch. Now, I've never created a piece of furniture before, but I wanted to sketch out the idea I had in my head first. I wanted it to be a little skinnier than a normal end table, but still take up the full run of the arm and have a little bit of storage underneath for remote controls and things like that. So I sketched it up, and then I went out and made sure the pieces of wood that I had were going to cover it, and I cut it up into three main sections: the top, the shelf, and the legs. A little jointing and planing. Ooh, Sapele. The next thing I did was I cut the four legs out and I made them all the same size. And the reason why I call this the Spielberg end table is I think I was watching the documentary at some point and his favorite lens is the 21mm lens. So I made the angles for the legs 21 degrees. So I cut the shoulders for the tenons and I just did the sides. I didn't do them all the way around. So once I had those angles cut, then I just kind of laid out the two pieces and marked where the mortises were going to go. Now the top mortises were going to go all the way through, and then the bottom ones, I guess, I don't know if they're really mortises or they're just side cutouts, I'm not really sure. So in order to get the angle, I had the same angle cut on a piece of 2x4, clamped it to the top, and wherever it was marked out, I just followed that angle all the way through. I feel like there's a much better way to do this. Probably not on an angle, probably straight up and down, and then you just cut the leg so that it's got a nice vertical tenon. But yeah, this was fun, going back and forth and trying to get everything to fit. The next thing I wanted to do was put a taper on the legs. I wanted to remove about half of it going all the way down. I did not have a bandsaw at the time. Instead what I did was I just clamped all four together and kicked one end up with a little bit of a stop and put it through the planer, and it just made all four the same taper as I went through taking off material. And this is what we have so far. The next part was to cut the little slots on the side that the legs were going to go through for the shelf. I made the top and the shelves a little bit longer than the diagram, but I still wanted to put an angle on the end of them. And that's when this happened. So it turns out if you get a radial arm saw from your brother-in-law, you should check to see whether the blade is sharp. In this case it wasn't, and I smoked out the garage. So I cleaned it up with some sanding, a little bit of planing, and more sanding and more sanding. And then came assembly. Now if you'll notice on the design drawing, the parts can't actually go together if you have perfect mortise and tenons. I didn't realize that, so fortunately when I was putting it together, the mortise and tenons weren't cut very accurately, which gave me a lot of wiggle room with the assembly. And because of that wiggle room, the shelf in the middle didn't have a perfect place to sit. Instead, I used spacers that I taped to the top shelf and the middle shelf in order to hold it in place while I glued it and drilled holes for the dowels that would hold the second shelf. So the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to put dowels in just for like accent points, but every time I see them, they're kind of flat and very circle-like, so I figured I'd drill them at an angle and you'd have these nice ovals. These ones on the top are not structural at all, they're just there for aesthetic reasons. On the bottom shelf, they actually go all the way through the legs into the shelf. So you can see here, I drilled all the way through and put those dowels in, so those were structural on the shelf. So as you can see here, there's lots of space around the mortise and tendons on the top. So what I did was I just cut sections and put some little pieces of maple in there to kind of cover it up. And it looked really good. Now it came to finishing. I had a bunch of stuff in the shop already. So I just tested out a couple different finishes on a piece of scrap. And I ended up picking the water locks. So I prepped the surface, got it all ready to go, and then put on some water locks. The water locks makes the Sapele look really nice. I love the finish on it. The only thing that I didn't like so much was the maple darkened a little bit and yellowed a little bit, but otherwise it came out great. Overall, I was very happy with it. And then we got this cool drying shot. So yeah, and it fit perfectly and it works great. And now for some sexy end table shots. This was a very fun project, and there's a couple of things that I learned from it, and I have to put on my to-do list. One is learn how to actually cut mortises properly, or at least practice at cutting them, because it took me way too long and didn't function exactly how I thought it was going to. Number 2, I should also learn how to sharpen my chisels. And number 3, I should think ahead about how the components will fit together. Some of the successes for this project, it actually works. I like the idea for the identical tapers, so when I'm doing legs in the future, if they just need a simple taper, I might use that jig again in order to make them all the same taper. And I really like the way the oval dowel inlays turned out. Whether they're structural or non-structural, they just give it a little bit of extra flair instead of just the circular dowel look. And I had a lot of fun making this thing. So that's the end of our show. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Cutting Out Back.